And now, of course, Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Lady, the member for Dagenham and Rainham, who made an excellent speech. She spoke with knowledge and passion about her constituency and about the challenges that face the residents of Dagenham and Rainham. And hers is a constituency I know, since I drive back to my own constituency on the A13 every week, and sometimes when it's closed, as happened last week, I find myself exploring even more of Dagenham and Rainham. And I'd also like to congratulate the member for Worcester, who also made a very good contribution. We look forward to hearing both of them in the future. I'd like to start by actually putting on record the thanks which I think are due to my right honourable friend, the Shadow Chancellor, and my right honourable friend, the former Prime Minister. One of the extraordinary things I found in the budget speech which we are debating is the complete failure to mention the two extraordinary challenges which the government had to face, that of COVID and that of the economic consequences of Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Those two events combined potentially threatened the survival of every business in this country and potentially could have led to a catastrophic increase in the cost of living for ordinary people. And it was only because of the intervention of the government in providing support that we managed to keep the economy going, and that those businesses and the jobs associated with them survived. And in talking about the economic legacy, the Chancellor's failure to even mention that challenge I find extraordinary. And it has left us with a legacy, but even despite the borrowing that was necessary, the government was actually bringing down the level of borrowing and had restored the economy. And I think when the history books are written, a lot of credit will be given to my right honourable friends, the Shadow Chancellor and former Prime Minister. Now, in terms of... Yes, of course I will.
Thank you for giving way. Does the Right Honourable Member accept that the opposition bench's decision to reduce gas storage and the decisions to fail to invest in the NHS over long periods of time considerably made dealing with those crises worse?
Interventions are a very healthy way to have a debate, but you must draw the attention of the member speaking, and speaking loudly, calling for an intervention normally helps. Sir John Whittingdale.
Well, I don't think that every country in the world faced enormous challenges, and actually the record of this government in tackling those challenges, I think, bears comparison with any other country, and that is something which cannot be diminished. And I will say a little bit more about particularly the NHS as I move forward with my remarks. But in terms of this particular budget, I saw that Alistair Campbell tweeted in defending it. He said it was a very Labour budget. Well, that is something certainly that I would agree with. It put up spending massively, it put up borrowing massively, and of course it put up tax massively. And to that extent, it was a very Labour budget. Now, in the first 30 minutes of the Chancellor's speech yesterday, she didn't actually make any announcements. She simply tried to justify some of the measures she was going to introduce by talking about the fictitious black hole. My right honourable friend, the Shadow Chancellor, I think, has already very adequately exposed why that is a fiction, and that the Office of Budget Responsibility was unable to provide or find any evidence for the figures that she was quoting. So let's be clear, that when it comes to tax and spending, it is a matter of choice. And it was the choice of this government to break all of the promises that they made at the time of the last election. It was their choice to break their manifesto commitments, not to increase national insurance contributions. And of course, in many of the other areas where they said that they would not increase tax on working people, the measures they have introduced are going to have a very significant impact on working people. And the denial that there was a tax bombshell to come is extraordinary, given that they have subsequently now announced £40 billion, which will result in the tax burden in this country rising steadily to what will be the highest ever on record. And yet this is a government that took office saying that their priority was going to be to fuel growth. Well, I can say to the honourable gentleman opposite that you do not fuel growth by punishing the businesses that are going to be responsible for creating the jobs and the wealth of the future. And the growth target in the Office of Budget Responsibility forecast following this budget, actually, it shows that growth is forecast to fall steadily. And the tax choices that have been made, and I want to speak about one or two of them, they too are a matter of choice. It was up to the Chancellor to decide how to raise the extra revenue. We have already, even before this budget, heard of one extremely damaging, painful decision, which was the withdrawal of the winter fuel allowance in order to save money by taking it away from pensioners across the country. And I know I've already received many emails expressing great disappointment that the Chancellor pressed ahead with that measure and did nothing yesterday to reduce its impact. But it is primarily businesses that are going to have to pay the price in this budget, estimated at a cost of £25 billion, the increase in national insurance contributions on employers. And that represents £615 more for every single employee of a business over the threshold. The result, if you increase the cost of employing people, it can have only two consequences. One is lower wages, and the other is fewer jobs. And in each of those cases, that is going to hit working people. And on top of that, businesses are going to face the increase in the national minimum wage. That is going to hit particularly some of the hardest hit businesses that are already finding it hardest to survive. It will impact on the care sector. It will impact on the hospitality sector. These are already under enormous pressure. And the decision to increase the national minimum wage for young adults, a 16% increase, that will simply have a consequence that it will be even harder for those people to find jobs. And the government also heralded just, 10 days ago, the investment summit, which was supposed to persuade international investors that this was a country they should want to invest in. And yet, a week later, we have higher capital gains tax, we have higher stamp duty, and we have a war declared on non-doms. And instead of investment coming into this country, already we are seeing the flight of people living here, the entrepreneurs on whom our future success depends, and they are leaving in droves.
People fleeing the country and investment. Can you please point to at least 3 examples of anyone who was highlighted in the investment summit now saying they will withdraw that money?
Well, the investment summit announced a lot of investment for which this for the Conservative government was actually responsible.
Exactly.
And I think, let's wait and see. The budget was yesterday. Businesses are going to have to look very carefully at their plans, but I don't expect them to do so within a mere few hours. But I'm happy to have this debate with the honourable gentleman again in a few weeks' time, once we have seen the impact of the measures that have been announced. Now, there are 2 measures specifically which I want just to touch upon because they impact particularly on my own constituents. One of them, which has already been mentioned a number of times in this debate, is the removal of agricultural property relief. Now, the CLA estimate that actually that will affect 70,000 businesses. And it is those farms, particularly family farms, that are going to feel the impact worse. And so it is hardly surprising that the president of the National Farmers Union said this budget not only threatens family farms, it will also make producing food more expensive. The shameless breaking of the promises on agricultural property relief will snatch away much of the next generation's ability to carry on producing British food, plan for the future and shepherd the environment. This is a measure which the Labour Party said they would not introduce, and which they have broken that promise and are now proposing to introduce, to the enormous damage, not just to farmers, but also to food security and to our environment.
Exactly.
The second measure, which I would just like to touch on, Madam Deputy Speaker, I see you've acquired speaker's cough, and I will, I will heed your warning. But I do just want also to mention VAT on private schools. My constituency, I have 3 small independent schools: Heathcote School in Danbury, Elm Green in Little Baddow, and Maldon Court School. The parents who send their children there are not rich. They make huge sacrifices. In Essex, we are very fortunate that we have really good grammar schools, and those parents make that sacrifice to help their children hopefully get into the grammars. And they are not going to be able to continue if a 20% increase in fees comes as a result of the imposition of VAT. Not only will they withdraw their children, but those schools are threatened with closure. And the consequence is that the children will need to be placed in state schools, which are already under huge pressure. My constituency is growing rapidly. There is enormous pressure on schools, and this is simply going to make it worse. This is a policy which is frankly simply vindictive and is going to do enormous damage. And I just want to finish very quickly, but because I note that the Minister for Health has come back into the chamber, and she would be disappointed if I didn't say to her, but I welcome the hospital building programme that is contained within the budget and the announcement of new money. But I once again reiterate that in my constituency I have a hospital threatened with closure. We have been promised a new one for 30 years or more, under both my government and the government before that. And she was good enough to see myself and my right honourable friend, the member for Whittingdale, the other day, for us to be able to make the case. And so I would simply say to her, if she does hold this money, I do hope that some of it she might be able to direct towards my constituency. Madam Deputy Speaker, this budget is one of the worst I've had in all the time that I've been in this House. It will do enormous damage. But I'm grateful for this opportunity to put it on the record.